Fantastic. So, welcome everyone. My name is Bourgeois. I'm the head of performance at Voyager Tennis Academy, and really excited to be hosting tonight's webinar with Yann, our academy manager, and man of so many skills. I mean, Yann, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Yeah, excited as well, mate. Thank you for taking me in.
Yeah, it's for those that don't know Yann, Yann's come across from France. I mean, he had a history of obviously really been involved in the sport from the early age. I know in the juniors in France, you were number 3 in the country, which being number 3 in France, obviously with the depth and the level, shows really from the level that you have achieved as a player. But also for those, sorry, you go.
It was pretty fun. Yeah, it was pretty fun playing at that level. Obviously got a bit injured around the age of 12, 13, but yeah, before that played all those Tennis Europe tournament and high level events, it was pretty fun.
Yeah, definitely. And again, not just as a player too, Yann's actually probably one of Australia's leading sort of talent development coaches. I know one of the things we're talking to tonight is obviously talking about training volume and programs to develop the sort of elite tennis athletes. And Yann's actually currently working, I think, 5 athletes that are tracking internationally, sort of in the from top 20 to sort of even top sort of 50 in the world. So again, really excited to have you on there on tonight. So but I think sort of, again, and Yann, happy to hear your personal experience, how it was in Europe as well. But for me, again, really keen to do this because, again, going back to when I was a kid, and again, being quite a good junior as well, I was number 1 in the country, won a junior slam, and it ended up playing professionally for quite a long time. It was one of the things that we heard so much early on, talk to players that were successful. And for me, all the families say, yeah, we play 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah, well, just doing it for a bit of fun. And again, we have a lot of athletes that are tracking both nationally and internationally. And to me, it couldn't be further from the truth. Like it really, they've always downplayed what they're doing. And I look at it, there are no real secrets to success. And Yann, you would have heard me say this a few times, but if you wanted to be a high level gymnast or a high level swimmer, I mean, everybody knows what you need to do.
Yeah, I guess you need to spend the time doing whatever you want to achieve to be the best at. And yeah, for my experience in Europe when I was a kid, I mean, being at the top level around the age of 10, 11, and 12, we knew basically whatever everybody was doing. We were all in the kind of the same program, which is the federation, the French Federation is leading that program, and everybody is doing basically a lot of hours from a really early age. And yeah, now even being obviously, you told everyone I'm working with some of the best players in the country, which is really exciting. But I kind of fear seeing that basically there's none of the best players in the country at any age are actually in a normal life schedule. They all have something pretty tight, and it really looks like a full-time job for some of the kids.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think that's sort of it's so true. And I think before we even go there to start talking about that element of it, I think what we've always done, and you know, we do a lot of this with our full-time athletes, it's actually really talking to the vision. And that's where I think one of the things we do, obviously Voyager has a number of athletes from different levels, but we sort of talk about a lot the vision. And then for us, it's really about athletes that want to be world-class. And what they're looking for is, again, a lot of high-level colleges. And again, we're talking about a lot of the best colleges in the world using that US college pathway to then go on the ATP and WTA tour. And it's something, I mean, for me, it's I didn't do it. And obviously it's a regret. And I'm really proud to see so many of our athletes now go to that path. Even to one of my former students, Alex Vukic, who's, if anyone sort of keeps an eye on the news, he's sort of really had an amazing streak, making final of his first tour event, coming through. I mean, beating some great players, born at Corridge, I mean, top 15 players, and now he's number 42 in the world. And I mean, you look at that, he did a 4-year degree at Illinois State University in finance. And it's just where you can see there's so many great opportunities. But coming back to it, these people, they have the aspirations to be world-class, and they are making a lot of sacrifices. That's one of the things there.
I think it's definitely a big part of it. All those sacrifices. As soon as you know exactly what you want to achieve, once you figured it out, you need to actually make the decision and put up some action in place. And in those actions, we're gonna have some sacrifices to do to actually make those achievements, to achieve those high goals.
Yeah, and no, it definitely is, and that's where we talk about the vision and really aligning the the vision and behaviors, because we obviously talk a lot to performance formula, which if anyone's interested to a lot of sort of learning more, Stephen Colvey is one of the leaders in high performance, and they talk about the performance formula being your mindset times your behaviors. You multiply that over time, it gets results. And that's what one of the key things again is really understanding that, because there's so many times that you'll see, to me, someone that has a program or a schedule, I wouldn't even say a program, but a schedule that's actually more of a playing for fun level, but the expectations say, hey, this is the direction that I'm going. And to me, that's where there's two things that can happen. You can either, again, realign your sort of standards and expectations. This is what I want to see. I mean, again, if I'm playing 2 or 3 times, there's no problem to me having that expectation, because tennis is so much fun. There's so much joy you can get from the sport. But I just think it's really important to understand what they are. And I know for those that can know us well, I was talking to Adam Feeney about this, where we see again some kids that have been tracking quite well, and he was sort of talking about some of the athletes that he was working with. That basically, again, because here in Sydney we have a lot of kids that are really, I guess, ingrained into private schools. They have that aspiration, hey, I want to go to a great Division 1 college, and talking to that, they're playing 6-8 hours a week, not necessarily around like-minded people, and then some of our athletes are not necessarily any more talented or gifted, just they're out working it. And it's
I mean those private schools are kind of appealing, I guess. They obviously a well-rounded program. If you look at the academic side and a bit of a tennis, they got some kind of good program. But if you want to compare to the really highest level, you won't have any of those kids in those programs. It's just simply not enough hours. And probably not enough players to play with either on those programs.
Yeah, and again, I was really fortunate to go to the US on a Tennis Australia coaches tour, and basically what it was about, knowing the level and talking to a lot of things. And that was again, Yann, you know what I'm going to say here, because both in the States and Europe, it was the most amazing thing that I saw was just so many inspired people, where tennis was the center of the universe. Everything else revolved around that. And you get to see the commitment, the sacrifices they were making. And again, that's where I think it's such an important thing to really understand is again, because I mean, we'll touch into it obviously on the idea of time on court, your private work, your technical work, your skill development, and even just the physical work. But it's a really, really simple thing, because we know again that what's needed to succeed at the highest level. But what we'll sort of look to do is we'll take you through some background first. I think sort of before diving into the concept of, and showing you examples of what some of the kids that are tracking are doing, it's actually talking to again some things like progressive overload, because what we want to make sure is that what people don't do is say, hey, okay, this is what kids this age are doing, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to do the same. I have sort of high aspirations, and the first thing is, again, it's a concept called progressive overload. We see that a lot at the academy, where we have kids that are coming in with a small training volume, and they're probably used to training 6 to maybe 8 hours a week. And again, all of a sudden, if you're going to go from 6 to 8 hours up to 12, 14, or even 16 hours, like a lot of the kids are, is we're going to have basically overload issues. And to me, that's
I mean, we saw it happening a lot into our program when often it's players from overseas that want to jump in a program and straight away jump on 16 or maybe 20 hours a week of tennis and fitness, and usually after 1 or 2 weeks we start seeing some injuries issues, or the body is actually breaking down quite fast. So yeah, that's where the progressive overload and, I guess, scheduling is really important.
Yeah, it is, and it's again, it's, I mean, you talk this concept in the gym where everyone knows, hey, I've got to start with light weights, then gradually increase the sort of the intensity, the repetitions as well. And to me, it's the same on the tennis court. That's one of the things that we start seeing when you get to a point that it's more about increasing the quality. Because again, to be really clear, it's not just about the idea of tons of hours; it's the idea of making sure that it's absolute quality. And again, progressive overload is something quite simple. It's about understanding where you're at and gradually increasing the load there. And again, I'm really, really happy. My daughter's actually joined our full-time program. She's caught the bug. And that was literally the first thing we looked at, was straight away, hey, we want to make sure we don't have any sort of stress reaction injuries and things can set you back. Because as Yann mentioned, some of our internationals, especially our Japanese warriors, just want to play every single session. And obviously the quality obviously drops. And then when their quest to get more hours, they end up losing. They end up being sort of behind on what they're doing. So just something really simple to understand. We want to make sure people don't sort of go crazy in and around that, but it's something quite simple. Because I think again too here is again bit of background too on what peak height velocity is, and this is where I think tennis is probably a little bit behind a lot of the other sports. Even if you want to sort of again look at the idea of what peak height velocity is, and I don't want to dig too much into this, Jan. I know we've done webinars on this in the past, so if you do want to learn more, we did it with one of the exercise physiologists from our partners at Precision Athletica, talking to it. But the idea of what peak height velocity is, the most simplistic terms, it's the point where your child basically has their major growth spurts. It's where they start growing at the fastest possible rate. And the key thing to understand here is that's when you have your greatest chance to actually have to get sort of those injuries. So that's where through those periods, that's where you've got to be really, really mindful to make sure that you're actually not overdoing it. That's where we look to back to sort of dial back on what we're doing. But it's actually quite challenging. Again, you look at sort of the graph that's up here. And again, if you just Google PHV graph, you can start finding more information about sort of trainability. It's got a trainability guide when you can work on certain things at certain times. But it is a really important thing to understand, because one of the sort of things what we look at is with pH, like pre-peak height velocity. And again, I'll talk about it a bit more. Kids can actually, again, their body can handle different loads. But that point at PHV is where things start changing quite rapidly. But again, if you're looking for more information, again, please do some research. But it's just an important thing. Probably something to talk about PHV. The hardest part about it is generally you don't know it's happened until it's happened. So that's where, again, we try to measure the kid's height, basically encourage you to do that with your own children, to measure every week or 2 weeks. And if you've seen they're shooting up by a centimeter or so, be really, really mindful, because that's, again, when you sort of we really look to pull back.
Yeah, just on that high peak velocity as well, Luke. I mean, I'm looking at the graph, and I'm gonna ask you the question. If I obviously know the answer, but there is a specific area of their fitness that they can develop on a certain age, and that's something to be mindful of as well, I guess.
It is. It is. I know my son, who I hope is not listening to this. He wants to know why he's the only boy doing gymnastics with 60 or 70 other girls. It's because it is like there's certain windows where you can actually really make a big impact, and it probably leads into. So even if you sort of think about it, if you saw the next slide, it's talking about sports sampling versus early sports specialization. And again, that's where there's so many different ways to train what that is in what we're talking about. Because again, I want to be really mindful that we just don't see people just sort of hammering it and really trying to rip into it, because there's certain things that you can do at certain ages. Like if you look at the speed burst there, again, my kids both did little athletics. So that sort of age group, know that, again, it's a great opportunity to really start maxing out your full potential with working on certain things at certain times, going through those. And again, this is just an average. Obviously, you've got your chronological age and development age. It can be different for everyone. I know for me personally, I remember when I was in year 9 at school, I had a photo with my 3 best mates, and there I was coming up to their shoulders. And I got the same photo done at our 5-year reunion, and they came up to mine. So again, my sort of peak height velocity was a lot later. I was late sort of had that late maturation. And again, what that does, it actually drags out those areas. So it's actually a really good thing. It's a really good thing to have, because what we see is generally the skills, you actually have a longer period of time to develop them. But again, something to be mindful of with load in and around that peak height velocity. And again, just this last sort of thing we want to sort of cover off sort of before going into some of the sort of examples that we've got. And again, most of the people here in this room, again, are younger. They are, so that's what we're sort of really trying to tailor it towards. But this is one of the things that I see a lot of, Yann, and you would too, and probably some of the discussions you've had with some of your students.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you start to be at a really high level, and they kind of a racing to have more hours on court and more privates, and sometimes I guess having a bit of a breather from tennis and playing a different sport can probably be actually a better idea and probably more efficient than just keeping adding hours and hours on the top of all the hours we're already doing. So I guess until a certain age, it's really important and really good for, I guess, for socialization as well. Just play another sport. I mean, basketball, you're gonna develop a lot of different skills. Gymnastics, you mentioned it, the flexibility. Every single sport gonna have specific things that the body's going to work on, and through fun as well. So I guess a little bit of a breather from tennis during the week, and developing those different skills with your body as well.
Yeah, and it's so true, because if you're, again, talking about the vision, if it is to play tennis at the highest level, I mean, you see what both the male and female athletes can do. We literally have people that can run for 5 hours on courts. They're great endurance athletes that are, again, super flexible. I mean, so explosive. And if you want to, again, do more research, what I'd do is there's probably a couple of versions. The Canadian Tennis Federation, to me, one of the most progressive and obviously high performing federations, and they talk a lot into this. They basically say before the age of 14, you probably shouldn't be specializing. To me, it doesn't mean you're not getting the hours. It's not about that. It's the idea of finding time to have that cross training element to what you're doing, whether it's playing basketball. And again, that can be a great cardio workout. It could be, I mean, again, gymnastics for flexibility. It could be little athletics. It could be different things that you're looking at. But I know here in Sydney, one of the biggest challenges for a lot of parents is, hey, how do I get the hours up? And obviously manage this as well. And that's one of the things we do know. But again, there's more information. And if you want to just Google the LTAD from the Canadian Tennis Federation, which is the long-term athletic development plan. And I know they have like a 500-page document if you're really into it, but they also have, I think, about a 12-page summary where they give you more insight on the idea of really the development pathway for athletes. Because, and I guess probably sort of moving into the idea of where we're at, again, we've covered a few range of topics there before sort of really getting to the nuts and bolts of it. But it's commonly known that the ITF guidelines is your age and training hours per week. Okay, so that's sort of what they look to, and the idea of your volume on course. Again, that's a general guideline. It's again, the specifics of it is again, that's just a general rule of thumb. There's also match counts on top of that from young athletes, probably.
Yeah, that's what I was about to add, just to make sure it's clear for everyone. We're talking about training hours on court, and yeah, every fitness session or every match play will be on the top of those training hours.
Yeah, because there is multiple elements you look at, and this is where, again, sort of talking to some of our athletes that are tracking, and this is an example of an under 12 female athlete that is, and this is actually their schedule. And you can start looking at the idea of what they're doing, because again, there's the element that we look at with their tennis training, and again, that tennis training here, which I know is quite simple. There is technical work. There is obviously more group work sessions as well, which is more tactical based. There's obviously skill acquisition sessions. There's a lot of the more heavier, the volume based sessions, as well as match play that's built into it. So it's a really simple way. And I'm not sure, Yann, if you want to sort of talk through any of these elements here.
On the schedule, yeah, of course. So basically, yeah, this girl come on the Monday, do a fitness session in the morning. Then she go to school. She'll basically go through the program, come with us at 1:00, and gonna have a technical session on from 1 to 2, where we got a pretty small group there, so we can work on technical. Go back to school. After school, she go straight with Tennis Australia, where she's gonna start with a fitness session, followed by a hitting session on court. Yeah, good. On the Tuesday, she can have a bit of a sleeping, go to school, and go for a long session with us from 10:30 to 1:00. And we can see that here she got a bit of cross training in the afternoon, so probably a bit of a breather for her, a bit of a fun, but a lot of skills acquisition here when she played basketball. On Wednesday morning, she got an early session at 6:30. When at 8:00 she finished that, she goes straight to school and come back to 1:00 for a technical session again. Add a fitness session just after school. Thursday morning again, back on the court with us from pretty early. Yeah, it's actually not written there, but she has a little bit of 30-minute fitness in between 2 tennis sessions, and goes to again a gymnastic with probably some friends, and then a bit of a breather again when she actually got some really good skill acquisition there with gymnastic, getting some flexibility. She's exactly the right age for it. Friday is a little bit lighter, and Saturday she got a good session in the morning, and got another one later in the afternoon when she has a hit. on Sunday. I'm pretty sure she is looking for match play almost every week.
Yeah, yeah, and even this weekend is coming up. There's another tournament, and again that's been a progressive build up to that point, to really sort of get there. Because again, there's elements of that where there's the on court. Because I know eventually we'll start seeing kids that are building up to again the tennis volume sort of thing. And this is one of the things I see here in Sydney, and also too in Asia, where we see with our Singapore friends, is the fitness element is absolutely paramount. And the idea of
the fitness limit, and we see that more and more, especially with the higher level athletes. The fitness limit, and the older you are, the more important it's gonna be. You're gonna need to build up that body to a really high level.
Yeah, and it's that blend. It's that blend of on-court work, and again across all elements. It's the blend of off-court work with obviously the fitness work, plus the cross training with basketball, gymnastics, and again for our fitness sessions too. There's sometimes it's a blend. Sometimes we'll play soccer. Sometimes we'll obviously play. I mean, all these different game based to just look at that idea of the wider range of skills. Because I think one of the things that I've seen probably my sort of the last 20 years is actually a deterioration in kids' ability to throw. It's a really interesting thing as we've sort of transitioned again, becoming sort of so connected, and so many people but spending so much time. And I know it's one of the things I encourage everyone to get as a parent, grab a Vortex, get out there. It's actually what I did this afternoon with my son. We went down to the park, hit the footy around, took the Vortex, had a throw. It's that element of their development that actually is so important. But talking to PHV as well, and this is someone who's to me looking to start to go through this. This is actually quite light because, as I mentioned to you before, the ITF guidelines, it's a rough guideline, your age and training hours. What we're starting to learn more about is pre-peak height velocity. It's actually not the physical side of it. The kids are so young, their bodies, and again, if you have a gradual build-up, you can actually pretty much, it's more around what they can mentally handle than what they can physically handle. Because what I'd say here is this is someone who actually schedule is again, it's not the heaviest. And again, this is someone who's at a traditional school, part of our full-time tennis school program. I know there was had a coach go to the IMG Future Stars quite recently, and I think it was a 24 draw in men's, boys and girls. There's only one child that was there that was actually part of a traditional schooling arrangement. The kids at all that level that were actually basically had flexible schooling arrangements or part of an academy that allowed them to actually put the hours in and get to that point. Because I think it's really interesting to see. And that's one of the things again is I've never seen the case of someone who's achieving like again really elite levels that's not making the commitment and the sacrifices to achieve that.
No, there isn't, and I can see even with the few kids that are going to some Tennis Europe tour now. They just came back from it, but in that Tennis Europe tour, one of the players was it was 8 players invited to that tour, and none of those kids were in traditional school. They were all online schooling or some kind of school that's going to help with the schedule.
Yeah.
So it just, I don't think it does not exist to have a traditional school schedule and be able to play those hours. It's just not possible, not sustainable, I would say.
Yeah, and again, it's interesting because I think I mean it's sort of I'd like to sort of understand what you did back home in France as well, because I mean I feel quite fortunate. I've had so many sort of sliding doors moments where I've crossed over, and I was really fortunate that my mum knew of a great coach who was coming back again, Kim Warwick, if anyone knows Kim, former Australian Open finalist, 6 times Grand Slam champion. My mum knew his sister, and she just said, "Hey, my brother's coming back into town." This is when I was 15, and just said, "Yeah, if you want, happy to sort of line up a session." I was looking for a coach, and Kim took me in, and again, it was one of those things there where I was really similar age to his eldest son, and we got on really great. Found like it was, I thought I was really coachable, and I had a really quick transition from being sort of, again, I know because Kim told me I was outside 300 the country as a 15-year-old, and all of a sudden Kim said, "Hey, look, I can do something with you," and we had a great relationship, and the things that we did though, and that's one of the things that I see now, Yann, in Sydney, and it's again probably the success of the program that we have is, I mean, my mum would pick me up from school early, a couple of days a week, and I would leave. I'd miss the last period of school. I would go and do a private lesson. So it was just the two of us. We'd then jump on court. We'd do a squad. I think the private was about 3:30 to 4:30. We'd then do a squad from 4:30 to 7:30. And I actually stayed at his house 2 nights a week. So I used to stay over. I used to sleep over with his eldest son, and we'd get up when it was dark. We're running 400s in the dark. Then it became light. We'd actually jump on court for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Do that twice a week. His wife would then drop me to Manly Wharf. I'd get the ferry across to my school. And again, I went to St. Aloysius College, one of the private schools, and I'd run into school just as the bell would go. The other 2 nights, I'd go to the state program, and literally it was the same sort of thing. It's what I had to endure to survive to get to that point. Because again, I sort of was, as I said, 300th in the country. I went from losing love first round of 16s nationals to making finals of 18s, to then sort of winning a junior Grand Slam. And things happened really quickly. Get an ATP ranking. It all sort of, but again, Kim was absolutely, again, he knew, obviously he was a great player. Hey, it's just about hard work.
It was a key in that life, probably at the right moment as well.
Oh, for sure. If I was, again, the sort of sliding doors moment, if it didn't work in that environment, it never would have happened. And that's one of the things that we see so often is the people that are achieving, obviously making big sacrifices. But I think that's where, again, it was part of the, I guess, the inception of the program we created. It was just how difficult tennis had become in Sydney, and having that balance between both worlds. Because if you start looking at the idea of how do we achieve this, because I mean, I look at this program here as the latest finish is at 7 o'clock at night. I mean, outside of that, you're back home doing your homework. There's balance, and again, that's where I know on the schedule there will be building. There'll be more hours put in as we sort of progress. But again, it's just a really clear insight into why they're tracking.
For me, Luke, in Europe when I was young, so before high school, for probably 9, 10, 11 years old, I had actually my coach picking me up at school during lunchtime. And so having a private lesson with him 3 times a week and having lunch with him at that time, it would drop me back to school. So that was for primary. Then obviously I had my squads during the evening. It was pretty late for me because it was 7:30 coming back home, and then dinner, and then obviously time to go to bed and all those sort of things. So and then first year of high school, I went to a college. We call that a college in France, but it's high school. And basically we finished it. It was a sports specific schedule. So we had not only tennis players, we got some soccer players, some swimmers. Everybody had the same schedule where we finished at 2 p.m. and everybody were going to a sport with the federation at that time. But even there, we quickly find out that it was not enough. So after that, after 1 year in that high school, I actually went off and do online schooling for 2 years.
Yeah.
And that was the only way to actually really find the hours.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I know obviously we're sort of really trying to talk to what you can begin to achieve. And again, I know we're sort of articulating the challenges, which I'm sure a lot of parents are aware of. I definitely am with mine already also. It is a big commitment. There is sacrifices. And I know it's, to me, the more I'm involved in tennis, especially the high performance space, that the more I've come to see that level, it's not inclusive. It isn't. Like the idea of being able to make the sacrifices and put in the work, it is exclusive. It weeds people out. It actually gets to that point where you see it's you've got to be committed, you've got to be disciplined, you've got to be again, you've got to be resilient, both body and mind. But I guess looking back to it, for me, with what I achieved, I just wish I started earlier. That was one of the key things. We had to start earlier and get ahead of the curve, because we know when athletes are tracking the advantages that can bring. But I think sort of moving on here too, again, that's an example we sort of provided there of a 12 and under girl. Here's an example, another, again, athlete that's tracking internationally in what we're doing. And again, just sorry, probably one thing I didn't say, it's great to see how we've got people here from all over the world. If you do have any questions, please feel free to fire them up in the chat box. We do want it to be interactive in what we're doing here, because I think that's one thing I can already see with some of the questions. One thing we should have added there too, Yann, with that previous schedule is we don't have an official AMS, like an athlete management system, but what we do look at is, hey, if the kids actually have big load and they actually are playing a lot of tournaments or whatever it is, that we will take it easy. The kids will bring in their recovery kit. They'll actually be working on other things to make sure that we don't overload them, because that's one of the things for us, having a full-time program, having athletes that are injured is a killer.
On that question for this player in particular, some of those fitness sessions that you can see on the schedule are actually recovery session where he actually learn how to recover quicker. He actually learns how to use his formula. He learns how to stretch. He learns how to actually use all those tools they now have at the academy and the Tennis Australia program to actually recover faster and know and learn how to recover at home and do his recovery properly. So there is a bit of a rest into it, not necessarily a rest day that's specific, but yeah, they learn actually how to recover to be able to manage the load.
Yeah, yeah, and again too, but being able to, I mean, we're really fortunate what we have with our ratios on court too. So even if we do know the kids are again having a big load session, we might do some pure technical work. It might be, hey, let's work on drop shots, let's work on backhand slice. It's not always about the idea of really hammering the kids. It really is about understanding that balance in the week is a total mixture of technical, it's tactical work. Again, there is the volume-based hitting that we do need as well. It's all mixed into what they're doing.
Interesting question as well here on 120 matches per year and how many are practice matches in those 120. None. They're actually all official matches, and we're probably going to add some practice sets onto that as well into our session, where we're going to obviously work on some specific tactical situation. And so yeah, all those matches that you can see here written, they're actually official matches during the year.
Yeah, and this is, I think, one of the things. I mean, probably more worthwhile taking through the schedule, but just a quick one here too. And something when we talk about it is, again, we do look at periodization, understanding when we've got preparation phase, when we're in pre-competition. And I think one of the things that we really see with a lot of our dedicated athletes too is, not that I want to talk about UTR at all, but I think people understand, they have a far greater understanding. It just runs in the background. And even if we are playing, again, Yann's talking about official matches, that they'll look at that, hey, this is just practice. How can I practice actually being able to compete? And again, this is a key element that I see with high achievers. They love to compete. They really do love to compete. And they're out there and they're happy to work on their game to understand that, hey, if I want to be successful at the highest level, I need to be able to handle pressure. So how do I actually work on implementing new strategies or new techniques or new elements to my game when there is something on the line? Because I mean, again, in the idea of what we deliver, they'll have multiple opportunities where they're not going to be stressed. We're not going to say, hey, we're going to make a drastic grip change or change of the game and throw them under the bus. It's really about being smart, because that's one of the key things we see here. And again, talking to matches for me in my journey, I know I saw it this week. We had a J200 ITF out at Olympic Park these past 2 weeks, and we could just see that the match volume of obviously kids that are excelling, and it's just far exceeds those that aren't necessarily, they're sort of struggling to find their way. But yeah, again, I'll defer to you here to sort of talk through the idea of this schedule, because you can see again, and this is again another athlete that is pre-peak height velocity. It's something that we are looking at. And again, this is where again it really shows. And I was again really fortunate to spend time with Dr. Mark Kovacs, one of the sort of the world leader in this space on physiology and looking at biomechanics of bodies. And that again is what we're sort of seeing with a lot of the athletes that are doing really, really well, that they have built up this point where they can actually handle this fitment. And to me, they love it. They absolutely love it. But they've built up the ability to actually withstand the pressures in their bodies that are handling it. But yeah, I'm happy for you to take us through this.
Yeah. Look, it's pretty specific and particular for that player. Obviously, we can see that there's not much school time. He's actually missing a bit of school time, and he has to work on the side at home with his mom and parents to catch up really on that work. The school is accepting that and accommodating for that to happen. So obviously give him the works to catch up on with his parents, and he has to maintain a certain average mark to be able to keep that schedule on. But that's something we found with Tennis Australia with this. We wanted to add some fitness into his program, because it's going to start to be time for him to really build up on his athleticism. And so yeah, we can see that we add those two big block of fitness on Tuesday and Thursday, just after a quick tennis session. It's going to work technically, and just after that fitness session on Tuesday and Thursday, he has a big healing session where it's really just a hit. then Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is going to be on school with normal squad session where it's going to work tactically and technically as well. Friday morning, it has a long private where we work technically and then go back to the school. On Saturday as well, it's going to have a hit session where you're actually going to work on whatever it works tactically or technically, but basically with a hitting partner. And Sunday, that's where he's got a bit of homework to do at home by himself with his fitness. So that's actually a fitness session that he does at home with a specific program specific to him. But yeah, I think the main thing here for that program is that there's a lot of people involved to actually make that program happen. So there's Tennis Australia, there's myself, there's Voyager, and the school that allows that to let that happen and that accommodates and specifically give him the schoolwork to catch up on.
Yeah, and I think to add here as well, like we're not saying that hey, these are ideal programs. I know for me, looking at this, one thing I'd love to see is actually more cross training. I really would like to see more cross training built into this, into what's happening. Because I think one of the things to address too is there's the potential for burnout. There definitely is. So it's really about sort of understanding and managing the week. But this is where again, I think when you look at there's so many different things that line up. I mean, thinking back to like an Alex Vukic, one of the players again just doing so well right now is that was sort of our very first sort of batch of Voyager players that came through, and I mean he lived 5 minutes from where we trained. I mean there was a cluster of play. There were so many things that aligned to making that happen, and this is where again to have a program that worked for him is it was to me it was like, and it was basically the basis of our Voyager full-time tennis and school program, which we've created, which these athletes are part of. But again, there's so many different ways to again to
100%. Look, I mean, I don't think there's a perfect program that's going to have perfect schooling and perfect tennis program. It's just, I guess, up to the individual to build it up and get the closest you can from the perfect program. And and you're right, a few things need to line up to make it work. It is definitely not always easy.
It is, and I again, this is again a couple of athletes that are sort of before they haven't gone through their peak height velocity, and this is where once they do, this is where to me it starts becoming something you've got to be really mindful of. That's where you got to really start tracking again in detail. Obviously, once the kids start becoming a lot physically stronger, I mean the forces that are going through their body can be really really challenging. That's why I can't think so often we see it with younger athletes again. Probably this age is where we see a lot of wrist and sort of elbow and shoulder injuries. They can then progress to knees, and then again, once they do go through peak high velocity, again, that's where we see a lot of lower back sort of stress reaction injuries. So it's about being really smart through this, because again, as we do start getting older, to me, it comes a lot more specific to the individual. But you'll start seeing that the hours do again increase. And that's what we're sort of seeing even here with a couple of examples of a male and female athlete at that age. It still is quite big because I think that it's so important. Again, I always talk about vision, understanding what we're working towards. Because again, when you really understand that sort of formula, it's your mindset. Again, hey, that's what you want to be. Obviously, you're prepared to make sacrifices. You're prepared to put in the hard work. Prepared to push through exhaustion. I mean, prepared to really manage your time. There's so many elements that we see is super important because that's where, again, I look at this and sort of think about what we do is our biggest challenge, and also for us, our biggest asset is time. It's our one equality, and that's where, to me, there's so many stars that have to align to making this happen. So I think once we start seeing it on the higher end, that's where we start seeing a lot of kids. I mean, even Yann, I've showed you this information before with a lot of the kids that are going to the high level colleges. One of the big schools you'll just see constantly refer, because if you actually do look at kids that tells you what school, there's information out there to show it's actually Laurel Springs. There's a distance education provider where a lot of kids that actually are going down that path. And again, speaking to a lot of the great colleges, a lot of my colleagues are college coaches now, and they typically, their first port of call to recruit Division One players. And again, we're talking about sort of 10 and a half sort of plus players on the girls' side. We're talking 12 and a half plus on the boys. First port of call is the academies. They know the players. Again, the NCAA rulings are you've got to have a maximum of 22 hours a week, but they want to make sure they can handle that. that you're used to it. You're used to playing, training hard, obviously playing and been up to in excess of 100 matches per year. They want to make sure that you've actually got the load under your belt with the miles in your legs, so you can really um, survive. But I
Yeah,
think
I guess when you see those kind of schedule, especially for young athletes, you it can be a bit scary at the beginning. It obviously start at 6 o'clock on some days. On some days, they finish sometimes quite late at 7:30 o'clock. And you say, oh, well, how is that? How do they handle it? And I think it's a habit. It's a habit of waking up early, and it's something they're gonna have to manage if they want to go that path anyway. If they want to go that path to the elite level in tennis, whether it's in college or whether it's at the ATP level, they're going to have to wake up early and work pretty early.
Yeah, definitely. I think sort of trying to throw it open again. This is the idea. We're trying to sort of really specialize in the junior side. Again, if we do have some of our younger athletes, I know Yann, one of your really young sort of under 10s player, is again tracking it at an extremely high level. The same principle applies. We're seeing the kids are basically trying to get as much hours on court as they can handle. Again, once we get past that sort of pre-peak height velocity, it becomes a little bit more specific. Again, looking at their training cycles as well, when they're actually in their sort of preparation phases and moving to pre-competition, how we obviously taper and different elements. So it's actually quite hard to give you some clarity on that. But I think they're probably, unless there's anything else you want to yarn, is probably throwing it open to some more questions. I see some good ones coming through. And yeah, again, a lot of the questions here around the schools that we have in Sydney. You're right.
Yeah.
You're
There's
right.
one about tournament as well. How do you fit those tournaments into the week?
Yeah, so and I think that's where we are aware of the challenges. We definitely are. There are schools. I mean, my school was one of them. Even I was number one in the state, and I wasn't allowed to play PC Cup. Obviously, times have changed a lot. I know a lot of the schools are quite proud of their kids. I mean, but I actually couldn't play tennis for the school. The level I was at, it couldn't actually give me the needs. So I actually did cross country. It was actually to the dismay of the school. But it's really challenging there. We're seeing the same sort of things here again. Again, one thing we're talking about is just training. Talking to the match play element, it is really important to actually build into your tournament schedule. And I think that's where we sort of, for these athletes, actually quite straightforward. When we look at it, I mean, the way it's been divided up with our nationals, so for under 12s and under 14s, you have grass courts in January that works through in April to the clay court nationals. You then have the Rod Laver events in the sort of term 2 holidays leading into the hard court nationals in South Australia, sort of culminating in the Masters. So it's, to me, a really important part in actually knowing what am I working towards. And if you're not at that level, that's okay. To me, it's about understanding, hey, what am I actually working towards? What are the next things, so I can actually look at the idea of, again, putting in the hours, the training side of things. But it's still really important to have the feedback loop to understand what am I taking from this. And again, we understand that sort of those midweek or Thursday or Friday to Monday sort of tournaments that they're often are, it is challenging. But I'd always come back, and that's why, again, and you've heard me say it so many times, what's the vision? What's the vision?
Yeah, what's the vision? And if you're clear on your vision, well, you put the action that line up to it.
Yeah, and it's how we started it. Again, what we saw overseas, or what I saw, is just that the aspirations were high, and tennis was the center of the forefront of everyone's mind. And to me, it's not always about becoming a professional as well. It's one of the things that we're talking to here is to me what I'm so proud of. What we do is kids that we're developing. I mean, just to see the character. I mean, they're strong in mind, strong in body. And what I'm saying, even if it isn't becoming necessarily the world's greatest professional or making a living out of it, is tennis is opening the world. It's opening the world to it. And again, even though we're talking sort of more of the high end, it's the idea of becoming that elite athlete. If you haven't started early as well, that's where, again, we're talking about people who have started early. It doesn't mean that it's too late. It definitely is really important to try to find the best environment. And I think the key thing here too, Yann, because I know what we hear a lot of the time is people want to, it's about having a program. It's a program.
It is having a program. And I guess by program, we're not talking only about putting hours together and making 12, 14, 16 hours a week. A program is going to take really every element of it. So that means you got a tournament plan that's really clear. You know, as Luke said, you know what tournaments you're working toward and what tournament you want results. You're gonna tournaments you're gonna prepare for that, where you're not necessarily looking at results and just trying to work on the things you were working on, but put them into a real match and some pressure situation. Then obviously your tennis need to be programmed as well. Maybe one private to work technically, then some squads to be able to put those technical elements together in front of different players. Some fitness into it with stretching, with flexibility, with speed, with agility, with strength and conditioning. There's a lot into it, and it is not easy to build up that program.
Yeah, correct. And I think sort of answering a question here is basically recommend a number of hours should be playing by each age group. It's not. I mean, I'm not sure if you sort of again heard the part from my experience. I mean, I played professional for 13 years. I won 500. I won over 500 matches on tour and beat guys like Andy Murray and David Ferrer and the Bryan brothers. Was really fortunate in again some of the great wins that I had. I mean, I didn't really get fully committed till I was 15. And it's not saying I wasn't playing. Again, it's that full level of commitment. And I feel like probably that's one of my points of difference. I played every sport under the sun. I played cricket. I played rugby. I mean, you name it. It was tiddlywinks I was playing. It was part of, I guess, being a big family. I'm the youngest of 10, having 4 brothers and 5 sisters. It was constantly in and around it. I think that's one of the sort of the things that I understand. It's definitely not too late, but the earlier you do start, and that's what I'd sort of say for me. What I saw is I actually started reaching it at a later point, but that's what we're sort of really again. It definitely does help, but it's never too late.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say, Luca. I think there's two elements to it. There's obviously there's some kids that are starting having a really good program. We talk about that 9 years old we got that already striking really well. He has a really good program already from a really young age. It is not too late if you start later, but the earlier you are, obviously you get ahead of the mass. Now the second thing is it is a really long race. It is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And one of the biggest elements is to actually stay in the game, be able to sustain the training volume for a long period of time. So sometimes the guys that start a little bit later, it's actually a little bit easier to maintain it and sustain it.
Yeah, true. No, and I'm hearing again some of the questions that are coming through about fitness, and that was one of our learnings or my learnings from being. We've added so many more elements of fitness into what we do for our full timers. Happy to have those conversations, see what we can do more of. I mean, we actually do sessions before school as well that are purely fitness. So if there's anyone that has any questions around that, I know we'll sort of talk to. We actually are going to have an open day in our full time program, but again, there's other elements that you can tap into, but to me, it doesn't necessarily have to be through Voyager. Like, and that's one of the things here for me for fitness. It can be do things like little athletics. I mean, there's lots of different things you could look at. I know athletes do work independently with other organizations. I know a lot of our kids do work with Precision Athletica as external to our program. Again, they've got a great team there in what they do. And again, it's not just necessarily through the full-time program, but it really is sort of understanding if there's any probably key messages that I'm really trying to sort of get to it. Again, first establish your vision. It's really important, and that's why I think that to me, I hear it so often. People have an idea of, hey, this is what I want to achieve. That will really determine again the mindset. So to me, that's where we see people that are basically so committed to the cause that they're prepared to do what's necessary. Because obviously, therefore, it's our behaviors. Are you actually switched on? Are you focused? I mean, all these things that we start to look for. Do you have the ability to push through to exhaustion? Do you have the ability to really be intrinsically motivated where it's not about the person next to you on the court or the coach that's driving the session? It's all these key elements for me that are super important because, again, once our behaviors are in line, that's going to determine your results. And to me, too, if you're not prepared to do that, that's okay. Like I think that's one of the key things that I'm always sort of really sort of keen to express is that that's okay. Tennis is a great game. Can be a lot of fun. I mean, you can play against anyone at any age. I mean, it's really that's one of the true beauties of the sport. And it's so much fun to get out there and compete, especially here in Sydney on days like today. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. But I think it's again, try to make sure that you're giving yourself the best opportunity in doing it. But yeah, unless there's any other points, I think probably the last thing we are hosting an open day, something we haven't done for a while for our full-time academy. Um, we'll send out probably a link to registration if anyone does have any questions. If you do want to register and come and have a look, you can have an opportunity there to see what we're doing. It is for me. I love what we do, and I'd love to sort of express that opportunity to others. And again, if there are any other questions about things that we can assist with, please feel free to reach out to Yann and I. But and is there a few more questions coming through here? Just being mindful of everyone's time. Yeah, probably last question here. And I think probably that's what, just to sort of answer that question there, is obviously talking about there are only 100 ATP pros. Um, you're right. I mean, if you actually look at what we're trying to achieve, if it is about the idea of becoming a professional player, we're not necessarily saying that. For me, I love the fact that you can actually get an education from tennis, but typically there's about 4 to 5 jobs per year that pop up on tour. It's as simple as that. If you actually look at the idea of the field, if the goal is, hey, I want to play professionally, for me, I want my kids involved in sport because of the character that builds, their resilience, their problem solving, dealing with pressure. To me, it's more about those elements. If they want to play at a high level, fantastic. I'm trying to give them that opportunity to be the best they can be. But if you look at it from that perspective, hey, I want to be a pro. If you're not inside the top 150, you're losing money. So I think that's where the idea of I think the idea of playing professionally, it's where you earn a living. I know there's a lot of people out there that say they're playing professionally. If they're not making money, to me, it's a very expensive hobby. I think that's something there. But
I would say, look, on that question, maybe putting the hours and the quality in the hours is definitely necessary, but that doesn't mean that you're going to make it to the end. It's as simple as that. There is obviously a lot of kids, young kids, that are putting those hours together and the quality in it, and only a few are going to make it to the end.
Yeah, we talked about high performance being exclusive. It definitely is true. But to me, it's I've been involved in my whole life, and kids that we're around, we love what we do. It's a great journey. They're around like-minded people. They're they're in healthy environments. They're not sort of stuck in front of screens all day. That's one of the things that I do see is when it's done in the right way. Because I'm not saying again it's all sacrifice. For me, one of the sort of key ethos is actually having fun. So it is really really critical. But again, I'd love to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Again, if anyone is interested, we'll sort of send through a link if you do want to register for the open day, which is on Friday the 15th. It's going to be held at 10:30, so you can come and have a look to see what we do. But again, really thank you for tuning in with Yann and I tonight.